Doug Oberhelman, former CEO of Caterpillar and chairman of the board. Thanks for joining us again, and great to see you. It's been a couple of months or so, maybe 6 months since last we talked. But for the audience, I want to bring up two things. One, I just had a small medical procedure done, so I'm going to have a photograph of me up rather than the camera on me because I still have a bit of a wound showing, which would be unsightly. But also for those who haven't followed Doug Oberhelman's career, as I said, he was a former chairman of the board of Caterpillar and was in the unique position that very few people relative to the world population ever have of being able to run an international corporation and dealt with leaders across the globe on various issues. So, Doug, thanks again for giving us your time and insights because I think so many of the issues that we want to talk about with you today impact so millions of Americans as well as people around the world, and very few of us have any life experience that we can really judge these things. What are you following? What are the things that you're kind of focused in on these days as you hear behind the scenes and as you just listen to the news as all of us do?
These are interesting times, and I can remember being a child of the Vietnam era back in the 60s, early 70s. It was a tumultuous time for the world and really for the United States of America. And the era that we are in right now is far beyond what we saw happening in terms of international, domestic, almost chaos, where there's really no strong leadership by anybody around the world. So it's really an interesting time. And I guess lecture our kids and grandkids all the time to watch the news, pay attention, because they will remember this long into the future, as I remember so well the Vietnam era when I was in high school and college. But I think a couple of big things to worry about and watch closely right now, obviously geopolitical, specifically the United States, Europe, China, Russia. In the news every day, everything you read is true or not true, but the lists are rising. Obviously, China and Russia want to take on the United States, at least economically, and maybe somewhat beyond that in the case of Russia militarily in Europe, Eastern Europe anyway so far. So all of that sets the stage for some really interesting times, and I hope and sense comes to it over time. The other thing I'm watching is the state of the U.S. economy, which right now is surprisingly strong. I think everybody knows a recession was predicted to start long before now. It hasn't. The economy is slowing a little bit, I think, in some sectors and doing well in others. But I'm watching that. I'm very concerned about how that ends up. We got Europe in a recession. I see Japan just entered recessionary times. We've got two wars going in two different places. So you can paint a picture out there that wood is falling as hand is falling, and that's true. But if everybody else is falling around you, how long can that last? So those are the two big things I watch and worry about right now, Terry. And it's just really a fascinating time to be alive, for one, and hopefully this all the water finds its seeks its own level here very shortly, and we can move on.
You know, I was thinking of you when a month or 2 months ago when President Biden met with the leader of China, because you have dealt with you built a plant in China for Caterpillar, and you've met with other world leaders. When we look at the world right now, one of the things that it seems to me that there was recently this effort, a discussion, I didn't really put a whole lot of stock in it, of replacing the U.S. dollar as the world currency. Is that something that you think has any merit? I mean, to me, when I looked at the people that were allegedly trying to do this, Saudi Arabia and Iran and all, it's like, those people hate each other. They're not going to work together.
No, in my mind, that is not a threat today. It's not an issue. I mean, China certainly wants to do it. Japan at one time wanted to do it. The U.S. dollar is the reserve currency in the world and will be for a long time. The only threat to that not happening is down the road, if we can't raise money as a country and in the U.S. Treasury to sell more bonds to finance deficits and the debt we have, that's when you would start to worry about the reserve currency. But that's a ways in the future. I think everyone says that 8 to 12 years out at the current level of borrowing rates, hopeless insanity returns to Washington in terms of the Congress. We've got a very tight fiscal policy right now with the Fed. A very tight monetary policy right now with the Fed, and a very loose run the printing presses fiscal policy with the United States government. They're at odds with each other. And already, I just read the other day that the single largest expense now in the U.S. government is interest on its debt, surpassing defense and surpassing all the social programs. And as debt rises, that number is only going to go up and starve off defense and social spending. And at some point down the road, if that continues, like every country has been through, and I've lived in many countries and seen this, when you can't raise debt in the external markets, you can't finance it, that's when you get in real trouble. And we're on that path, but it's not imminent. It's down the road a decade. And hopefully by long before that, some sanity recurs to spending levels in Washington, which we have to get to. And Republicans and Democrats don't want to talk about that right now. But that's the longest single long-term threat, the biggest single long-term threat that I see that's very worrisome. But it's like termites in your house. You don't know they're there. All of a sudden, when you find it, it's too late. The walls are hollow. And that's what's happening to us right now as a country. If we're not careful, that will result in bad things down the road. So that's my little lecture on the debt and spending levels. But that certainly long-term is a really big issue.
Yeah, it's something I think I would agree with you that we need to, as a nation, focus more on this debt and how to get a hold of it. I was covering Congress when Newt Gingrich came in, and ultimately, even though he had a tug of war with President Clinton at the time, they had 4 years in a row where the government was producing not a profit, but a surplus, and actually paid down the national debt to some extent. So we really need to go back to that kind of a...
We do. You've got to get it to balance. And I get a kick out of these politicians that say, well, we're going to cut spending enough that we're going to pay off the national debt. We'll never pay off the national debt. It's too big. But all we need to do is balance the budget so we don't borrow more. And over time, both of the economy growth and GDP, the balance of the debt comes back into something that's workable, but you're never going to pay it off, and it's likely never going to be paid down much, if at all. But you can't keep raising the debt. It's got to stop. The debt level, the debt limit, they all get in trouble with, we're not going to raise the debt limit because we only take out more debt. Well, that money's already spent. That's a ridiculous argument. This year's budget is where that's got to start. And that's really, really important that somehow we get a hold of that quickly. I don't see it with the current administration, and I don't see it with Trump or Biden, whichever one continues on. Trump blew the budget the last time it was in and spent as much as everybody else did. Now, granted, the current administration spent a lot more, but he was not a bad budget guy, and I don't expect we'll see that of him in the future if elected, which is one of the things I'd really like to see from them, in both of them.
Yeah, one of the things I can say on economic policy that Trump says that I think is wrong is that he won't touch Social Security or Medicare. And it's like, if you look at what we call the entitlements, that eats up, those consumes somewhere along the line of about 62% of the U.S. budget, and you have to have defense, and that's now down to about 15%. So, with all the things, the dangers going on in the world, you really can't cut the defense budget a hell of a lot.
You're exactly right, Terry. And then we've got this burgeoning interest on debt that's going to chew up into both of those priorities.
Right.
And it's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher every month that goes by. So this is something that's really going to come into play in the next decade. And the sooner you get out, the better. People have been preaching this for decades, and this hasn't worked. But I share with you the Gingrich Clinton success they had. And And, we've been through Iraq war that broke the budget. We've been through a couple of recessions that broke the budget, COVID that broke the budget. But be that as it may, you can't spend, you just can't do this.
Right. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is at the end of Trump's first year in 2017, December 2017, they had the Trump tax cuts that cut both marginal income rates, but the tax cut of 2017 also cut the tax on American corporate profits that were made overseas. So people like Apple, sell their Apple phones around the world. Caterpillar sells around the world. And you pay a local tax for what you sold in France or India or Chile. And what profits you had left, the corporations were not bringing that back into the United States because the United States wanted to then tax them at another, I forget what the rate was at the time, 30% or 20% or whatever. That Trump tax cut lowered the tax cut on profits made overseas and brought back in ultimately over $1 trillion back into the U.S. economy. Now that's going to has to be renegotiated coming up, and so this is going to be part of the 2024 issues that are going to be discussed and what happens in the future. How important would you say, as an international business CEO, was that lowering of the tax rate on profits made overseas?
Well, extremely important. And not only that, the Trump tax cuts, have gotten a bad rap, in my opinion, because while it didn't cut rates on big companies, it cut rates on middle class, it cut rates, everybody got a tax break. And if you look at tax receipts and revenues after the tax cut, in total, they actually went up because the economy grew. It brought back, we all repatriated, like you say, over $1 trillion in cash that came in that we paid the lower tax rate on. The U.S. got the benefits. But there's more than that. The R&D tax credit that's been around forever that allows a company to deduct from its income and let's pay lower tax, R&D investments. That's a tremendous benefit and help to this economy in terms of productivity and the competitiveness. That's a huge piece. There is also a piece for increasing or enhancing deductibility for machinery purchases. Obviously, from Caterpillar, I would like that. But it applied to all kinds of things in commerce that gave businesses a break. All of that led to higher tax revenues for the United States government. Now, all those are going to go away at the end of 25. So suddenly, we're going to see both high tax rates come back. Guess what happens if that's allowed to happen? Profits are going to get stored overseas again. There'll probably be less benefit for doing some of the things we've been doing, like R&D and so on, because it's an after-tax number that's gone up. And all of that comes into play. I'm very worried about it. And again, if we continue, the problem here is if we continue the tax cuts, the way the damn tax law is written, the deficit goes up. Well, the other side of this argument is, what are we going to get to pay for all those tax reductions, which are really tax increases, but they're going to call them tax reductions? That's the folly of this, the way that law was written. They did it to fit into an overall deficit reduction package they were trying to do at the time, but now rates go up, so we'll take rates back down, so you got to find pay for us to get it back down. And in this Congress that doesn't get anything done, how hard that's going to be. First year of a new president, whichever one it is going to be very interesting to watch that, but I'm worried about getting something done on that, because if not, they just expire and bad things happen from tax increases. We all know that.
Having watched Congress for over 30 years, having been in Washington and covered them and continuing to follow them, it seems to me that so many times people use the tax code as a form of punishment rather than approaching taxation by saying, what should we do relative to taxing that will build a stronger American economy and build more jobs and more profits. We want our U.S. corporations, or it seems to me we do, to be making money and be strong. That's what's given American workers this standard of lifestyle we've enjoyed.
Well, you're exactly right. And the tax code is also a social code. And a lot of that's not meant for competitiveness of the nation, but it's things we want to stimulate socially that we want done. And it's a good example. It's just the fact housing tax credits, historical tax credits. All that takes away from government revenue, but it's things we choose as a society we will invest in. So all of those are a trade-off. There's all kinds of things that go into that. But the end of 25, the 10-year end of 25, it was actually 2017 to 2025, is going to increase taxes on almost all businesses and almost all individuals. And I don't think that's what you want to do in an economy that's, frankly, not that resilient right now. And probably by the end of 25, I hope it's better, but who knows? So that it's really going to be a tough one for Congress to grapple with, just because of the way it was written and set up back in 2017. It was really poorly done, in my opinion. And we knew it at the time, but everybody took it because it was a tax cut. But we knew the time to pay the piper was coming back, and sure enough, that's January 1, 2026 is when that starts.
You know, one thing I'll point out to people, you touched on this, but I want to emphasize it. There was a report put out by the late economist Murray Wiedenbaum, who was an advisor to President Reagan. He went back to Washington University in St. Louis, and he did a study of tax cuts. And every single time taxes were cut on the marginal income tax rates, in other words, where you lower the level of taxation on incomes, under Kennedy, under Reagan, under George W. Bush, we see the U.S. Treasury gets more money. So it's not an opinion. We have the Treasury numbers. When they cut taxes, it puts all these entrepreneurs. You were a huge businessman. I was a micro businessman with a small printing business in St. Louis. But I always wanted to, kind of like in any manufacturing as you were, you have to buy something that's going to improve your productivity. You have to buy a new press. You have to expand your capacity. And so when you get some extra dollars, you don't go out and just blow them on wine, women, and song. You put it back into your business, right? And so it really grows the economy, and that's how it works. I lament that we don't hear about this in the news, or that most of us are never introduced to these concepts. But you always hear that a tax cut's going to blow a hole in the economy, in the budget. It doesn't. It actually brings in more money, and the Treasury numbers prove that.
I've seen a number of those studies, and I think the evidence clearly reflects that. And we know historically as well. And the farmers, in the short term, for a year or two, you might suffer that. At the end of 25, that's a pretty big hit. But and the only statement I think is very true. If you want less of it, tax it. If you want more of it, don't tax it. And I think that comes right back to the statement you're making, Terry, that if you want more of it, tax less, the government takes in more because the economy grows, you're making more money. And taxing a bigger pie rather than taking a smaller pie, a bigger piece out of a smaller pie, I guess.
You know, speaking of government actions and business, and so much of what you do as a businessman, especially one with a corporation as big as Caterpillar is you have to deal with a whole lot of government rules and regulations, and then we talk about economic policies we have, but then there's social policy, and one of the big trends these days coming out of the Biden administration is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's kind of the flavor of the year, or last couple of years. And the government wants to mandate, how many, check the boxes, how many blacks do you have, how many left-handed people do you have, how many, and what is your thoughts about this? It's not like you want to run a corporation where everyone's a white male, but as an employer and as someone who has an HR, and you work through all of these regulations, just give us your thoughts on this DEI business, and what should we as a public, an American public, expect from our American corporations as far as employment?
It's really, there's a big debate going on right now, and a lot of people call this stakeholder capitalism, or a company, the corporation is in business to serve all the stakeholders, which I believe is absolutely true. And I always looked at this as a three-legged stool. You've got to serve your customers, you've got to reward your shareholders, and you've got to absolutely embrace your employees. Those are the three legs of the stool. And there's no doubt in my mind that diversity, equity, inclusion have to be part of a company's, a corporation's, the private business thinking. I lived in Japan 4 years where there were no women in business. And I'd see young women come in as interns and turn into tea girls after 3 or 4 years. And I thought, what a waste of talent. Half the country is being wasted. And not you, their brains are not being used. So it's very easy to conclude that there's all kinds of brain power available if you can find a way to embrace them, include them, and get them in. So you have to be for that, which is so obvious to me. What's happening with the DEI movement is it's taken a life of its own, and suddenly it's turned into I think a real indiscretionary thing where, like, you don't do this, you're going to do this, which causes you not to do it, not to do the task you're supposed to do. Or let's say you want a third of your management ranks, whatever, to be female. You make it a third and you quit. No, you don't. You go after the best people you could get. Well, it's really gone, as usual in some of these things, way further than it needed to go. And I don't know how it gets back in the box, but the other thing is the climate advisory services, pushing investments. Well, those didn't work out because they excluded too many things that made good money that were also working on climate effects as well. So you have to balance all of this. And to think today that a company or a university, look what's happening to that, is excluding people, is absurd. Because if you want to be the best at what you're doing, make the best product, sell the best, whatever you're doing, you've got to have the best people. And you've got to have people that don't look like you, or me, for that matter. And let's do all we possibly can to make sure the doors are wide open and opportunities are provided for everyone. But when the government starts dictating you got to check the box, that's what you do. You go through the motions rather than truly live it and believe it. We have to live it and believe it. Believe it and live it to make it work. And once you do, good things happen from that. I don't think anybody disputes that, but boy, the government intervention around this is just taking it way, way too far, in my opinion.
We won't keep you much longer. You and I are both residents of Illinois, and I'm interested in the national issues, as we've talked about, and even the global issues, and we touched on that lightly. We did it in an earlier interview, and we'll do it again, hopefully. But let's talk for a moment about Illinois. And what are your thoughts, being as familiar? Caterpillar was headquartered here. It is no longer. You're still a resident here. You're familiar. You've dealt with governors over quite a number of years in your career. If you had the ear of the governor and the legislature and you said, what can we do to make Illinois a better place for growing business here and turning this state around, what kind of advice would you offer?
A couple things. It's a great question. I am my wife and I are both Illinois residents. We do not have a vacation home in the winter. We won't go to Florida or Arizona. We stay here in Illinois all year round. Maybe that's not the brightest thing to do in the middle of winter. It's extreme below zero, but that's pretty cool. But I've watched Illinois go through, as you have, we all have, used some Olympic cycles in the last 20 or 30 years. the overarching thing right now is the unfunded pension liability that arguably is $200 to $350 billion. That has to be addressed. I give our current governor Pritzker a lot of credit to take us out of the news. The budget is relatively balanced. He's out recruiting, trying to bring business in a difficult environment. But all of our neighbors are really, really after pro-business policies and being able to attract business. We can do it too, and we are, but we can do a lot better. But the overarching thing was the pension liability, which everybody sees, and it's out there. It's sucking up municipal finances. It's sucking up state finances more and more by the day. And that just takes away from areas we could be investing in. But I just really kind of wince when I see all these lists that come out that put Illinois at the bottom of things. And then, the survey, CNBC surveys about to come out on best places to do business. And we know we're Illinois, we'll be, down towards the bottom. But I'd really like to see that move up. But I give the current government credit on getting their hands around the budget deficit, balancing the budget, and starting to make some moves. But a lot more has to be done between now and I'd like to see us at the top half of a lot of these rankings and move up. But that's a long way away. And I think as long as that pension liability is out there and continuing to increase levels of investment by all levels of municipalities, we're gonna have a hard time doing that. But that to me just is the overarching thing that's holding us back.
Yeah, I often say Illinois has so many things going for it that can't be duplicated, where it's smack dab in the middle of the country. Other states can't move, that we have to go out of our way to screw things up, and we have. But it has gotten better. I mean, to give credit where credit's due. The unpaid bills run up by the state when Governor Pritzker came in, or the high point of Illinois before he even came in, where it was up to $16 billion in unpaid bills, and now the state is like net 30. They're current on bills, and they have $2 billion in a rainy day fund. So, they...
Big accomplishment and well done. I was on, at that time, prior decade, a number of charitable boards that were owed millions of dollars from the state that wouldn't pay. And then the state would pay interest out to make it even worse when they did pay. That's behind it, my whole. And now to solve the pension thing, because what that drives are, the city of Peoria has to spend more, the city of Chicago has to spend more every year just to fund the liabilities that make any headway in the liability. That takes away from services, that takes away from investments, that takes away from people that attract other businesses. And if we could get that solved, we'd do all kinds of money, do all kinds of great things, but there's no political will to get after that one right now. But that is the one, I think, that would make a big difference for Illinois down the road. And I'll tell you, my wife and I love Illinois. My wife was born and raised here. I've spent most of my life here. It's a great state that, despite what everybody wants to say about it, that we can do a lot better, I think, and particularly compete with our neighbors.
I'll say so much of Illinoisans, and I was guilty of this. You drive from Springfield to Chicago and back and forth. You got to go out of your way a bit to get over to Peoria. But I had a friend there and actually spent more time than I had previously. And it's really a great city, and they've really developed their riverfront. It's a good place to go and see. And there's so many great communities like that around the state that people, not that you don't want to go to Europe or other places, but, for a little weekend jaunt or just even for a day drive, sometimes it's good to go out and explore.
Yeah, well, I've been active in Peoria since I retired and trying to help make its image better. And we've started a new campaign here for Greater Peoria. We've done some advertising, trying to attract people to move here and take jobs. We've had good luck with that. And surprisingly, we've had thousands of resumes with people wanting to come and live in Peoria. And that's great. So we're going to continue on that campaign. But you're right, there's just gems like that all over the state. And I'm glad I live here, frankly.
Doug, I'm so really appreciative of your time and your willingness to share your thoughts. There's so many other issues. I could talk to you for hours, but we don't want to do that at one time.
We can do another one in the future, though, too.
Yeah, we had Christmas and the holidays in between, so it went longer since the last time I had a chance to talk with you. But let's touch base before too much longer. I'll tease our next when we do the next one. But I look at things like AI, artificial intelligence, and if you're running a major corporation, you have to manage for today. You had the payroll and all the sales, etc. But you have to look to the future. And so I'm kind of curious, having run a micro business, how do you do that? And in fact, I'll say as a quick aside, the House Armed Services Committee today is a hearing on outpacing China, expediting the field of innovation. And one of the witnesses was saying that they're making lasers now that are going to be 10 times stronger than their previous lasers that are currently being sold, and those will be out next year. So the pace of change in our society is not like when you and I grew up. It seems like what took 20 years of change before now happens in 5 years or less, and so it becomes an issue.
I'm so excited about AI. I've been experimenting with a couple of the chat bots and doing different things. We're just scratching the surface, but I am that is inventing similar to the 90s. When then AI is going to be that next productivity leap going forward. Frankly, I can't wait to see it, but it's going to be something to man for sure.
I was going to say, I say this to people, and you say things I think are so important, but I want to underscore this again. You and I went through the world before the internet. And when the internet came along in the 90s, it obviously just changed everything. And I used to tell people, isn't it cool that we can send emails? They would say to me, I go, you haven't seen nothing yet. We're going to have sound, we're going to have video. And look what you and I are able to do now, where I, not too long ago, had to drag all my equipment, drive to Peoria if I wanted to do an interview with you. So, but this is going to change the world. I think we agree. AI is going to change the world in a similar manner. We're going to be looking back 5-10 years from now and going, wow, can you believe what we were doing back in 2024? And that seems so crude. In every field, medicine, manufacturing, everything is going to change. And it's exciting to go through this.
Yeah, I agree. Everything's going to change. In fact, I can't wait because society should be the beneficiary of that, despite some of the really terrible downside that the model. We'll sell the way through that, but the good people that we have will find a way to use that in a great way. That's a great subject.
Right. I'll let you go, but these are some of the things we can touch on and give it more time than what we have for today. But again, thank you so much, and hope you have a great day and a great couple weeks ahead until we can connect again.
You bet, Terry. Good to be with you. Thank you.
Take care now.
Again.